You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
For the community, by the community.
Hello and welcome to Two Guys and a Lot of Wine. I'm your host, James Kimbrough. Bobby P is on vacation this month, but I'm joined today by a very special guest and a first for this show, our very first winemaker, Antonio Maria Soares Franco from the family-owned vineyard Jose Maria de Fonseca, headquartered in Lisbon, Portugal. Antonio, thank you so much for flying all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to join us today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about the family history. I know you have one of the oldest vineyards in Portugal.
Yes, we are actually the oldest table wine company in Portugal. Our company was founded in 1834, so in the beginning of the 19th century. And it's been always a family-owned and family-run business. Actually, I'm a member of the seventh generation of the family who owns and runs the company. And the US for us has always been a very important market. Actually, my father was working was living in the US when I was born. That's why I was born here in Hartford.
I was just going to say, you're here from the local area, aren't you?
Yes, exactly.
So you have ties here in the United States and in Portugal.
Exactly. So for us, the US is a very important market, and I'm here all the time promoting the wines.
Well, so you must know that here in the United States, when we think of Portugal, we think of Madeira, we think of port, we think of the cork that goes into the bottle to seal up the wine bottle, but we really don't think of red table wine or white table wine when we think of Portugal. But that's all changing now. Portugal is exploding with all these great wines, and yes, and your vineyard's been a big part of that. Yeah. So you've got some fantastic stuff for us to try today, and you've got a Vino Verde, which I'm really into these days. So why don't we get ahead and go ahead and start some of these.
So let's start with the Vinho Verde. It's called Twin Vines. And this is a Vinho Verde. It's a brand we created when I have twin daughters, and when they were born, we created this wine to celebrate the birth of the two babies, and they are twins, so that's why this wine is called Twin Vines. And we thought it would be a perfect idea to celebrate the birth of the babies with the Vinho Verde, because Vinho Verde is such a lively wine, such a youthful, a lot of vibrancy, very crisp, very sharp. And we thought it would be the best wine to celebrate the birth of the babies.
What better way to celebrate than with a bottle of wine, their very own wine. And this is true to a Vino Verde style. You've got a lot of effervescence with this. A great citrus nose.
Citrus, yes.
And a nice clean finish.
Very clean. It's perfect for this time of the year.
Yes, my co-host and I are always talking about getting a nice cold bucket of ice out on the back porch and throwing a couple of bottles in, and great way to just enjoy the summertime.
Absolutely, and I would recommend everyone to try Twin Vines as their summer wine.
Now I drink Vino Verde by itself, but what food pairings would you recommend for this?
Would recommend something relatively light, like a salad or maybe some pasta, or even a slice of pizza, but not very heavy meal. Something light, something that you would eat on a nice warm summer day. Even some fish, some grilled fish goes well with Vinho Verde.
That'd be fantastic.
Or on its own, it's definitely wine you can have just without any food.
That's my favorite way to have it.
Yeah.
But what you've created here is phenomenal. I love this. It's easy drinking. It's light.
It has only 10% alcohol, so it's usually a wine that is lower in alcohol. So less calories as well. So for the ladies, for this time of the year, they enjoy it a lot.
They're always looking to cut those calories.
Yeah.
Now Vinho Verde is up in the northern part of Portugal. You're headquartered in Lisbon.
Yes.
Did your family vineyard start out in the Lisbon area?
We started in the south of Lisbon, in an area called Azeitão, which is a Setúbal Peninsula. So about half an hour drive south of Lisbon.
That's the part that just sticks out just below.
Just below Lisbon, yes.
Yeah.
But nowadays we have wines from all of the important wine regions in Portugal. We have wines from the Alentejo, which we have here, from Douro, which is home of port wine, and of course and Vinho Verde as well. So we've pretty much covered all of the important areas of winemaking in Portugal.
Well, I noticed you've done a couple of acquisitions of other vineyards throughout Portugal. So
Yes. So yeah, we bought a winery in the Alentejo, which is the one we're going to have later, José de Sousa. A very interesting winery with a lot of history. We bought vineyards in the Douro, and we have here 2 wines from the Douro. So we've continuously tried to expand within Portugal and with other important wine regions there.
But it all started with the Lancers?
Yes,
Is this
actually,
the oldest?
This is the oldest wine that we have in the States, and Lancers has a very important history in the States. It was created in the end of the Second World War. And at the time, the wine business in the States was a very sort of elite business, very high-end wines, and it was not really for the masses. And there was a vision. There was an American man who visited us in the end of the Second World War, and he had a vision, and his idea was: there's thousands of U.S. soldiers fighting in Europe. The war is almost over, and these soldiers are going to come back to the States. And these people will have acquired European consumption habits, and among those habits will be the consumption of wine. So we wanted to create a wine that would be sort of a wine that would democratize the wine business in the States and would appeal to the masses. So that's why he was looking for a rosé, which is the sort of wine that would be easy to drink, and for someone who had never tried wine would be a perfect wine to start drinking wine. And he created this brand here called Lancers in a very unique shaped bottle.
I was just going to say, I've never seen a wine bottle like that before.
Yeah,
So
that was one
out.
of the reasons why the brand was so successful, because of the unique shape and the color of the bottle as well. And the name Lancers, because that gentleman, Mr. Henri Bear, was a fan of a Spanish painter called Velázquez, and there is a very important painting of Velázquez called Las Lanzas, which means the spears. And he was in love with the painting, and basically created Lancers as the name of the painting, Las Lanzas. And this brand had a huge success in the States. It was actually in the 70s was the #1 imported wine in the US. We sold, and that was the reason why my father came to live in Hartford, was because of the success of this brand. And nowadays we are going back to this what we call retro chic bottle, because it's like what was cool in the past is going to be cool again. Yeah. So we're sort of reviving all of those values of the Lancers brand with this package.
All right. Well, let's give this one a taste.
Try? Yeah,
absolutely.
So this is a rosé, very again light, 10% alcohol also. Produced with the main grape varieties of Portugal, Castelão, Trincadeira, Aragonês, Touriga Nacional.
I was going to say that Portugal has so many great grape varietals, but you don't hear of them very often here in the United States.
They're difficult to pronounce, but we have quite a lot of. We are one of the countries that have more varieties, together with Italy and Greece, for example, also have a lot of varieties. And that is the beauty of Portugal, because we can create wines that are pretty much unique and that taste and have aromas that are very unique and typical to Portuguese wines. And this is what we have here in this rosé.
It's a very dark colored rosé.
Yeah. So you see there's a touch of...
It's so light.
It's light,
Yeah.
It has a touch of spritz, of fizz to it as well.
Yeah.
A touch of sweetness, so it's Again, it's a wine that, of course, you can consume this all throughout the year, but this time of the year, it's a great wine to have as well for a warm summer day.
Yeah, a lot of our viewers get a little leery about sweet wines, and I just want to emphasize right now, this is not overly sweet at all. You said just a touch of sweetness, and that's the perfect description.
For the Portuguese palate,
Yes.
we are not used to sweet wines at all. So this for us is just a touch of sweetness.
It is very subtle.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fantastic.
So this is a wine I have quite often at home when I'm with my wife at home at the end of the day, just drinking a glass of wine before dinner.
Before the meal. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a great way to start the meal.
I would start every meal with this. All right, let's move on to your Periquita.
Periquita.
Now, is this one of the properties that you acquired?
Well, actually, Periquita is where it all started.
Okay.
So Periquita was the name of a property in Azeitão, which is in the area of Setúbal Peninsula, and the property was named Cova de Periquita, was the name of the estate. And the founder, José Maria de Fonseca, was the founder of the company, and he planted a grape in this estate called Cova de Periquita. He planted the grape Castelão. And soon enough, the wine started to have a lot of success. The wine was very good, and a lot of people around this area started to ask him for plants of the Periquita. But Periquita was not the grape; it was Castelão, actually, the
Right.
grape. So from that point onwards, there was a confusion between the grape, the official name of the grape, and the brand Periquita. And a few years later, we needed to clarify things, and we have now the trademark of Periquita. So this is really the first wine to be bottled in Portugal, the first brand of Portuguese wines, and is a true ambassador of Portuguese culture all over the world.
So this is very similar to what the French did with the champagne name. People started copying champagne, the style, and then marketing it as champagne. And the French stepped in and said, you can't call this champagne, you have to call it sparkling wine. So you've done the same thing with the Periquita name. You've protected that by saying...
It's a similar story.
It's,
because otherwise, everyone else could use the brand name Periquita,
Right.
but Periquita was our own brand. The official name of the variety is Castelão.
Okay. Let's give this a try.
Why don't we try it? Yes.
So you have other people growing the Castelão grape,
Yes.
and they're allowed to do that. They just can't call it Periquita.
Exactly. It's one of those cases where the category and the brand gets confused. It's like other brands like Xerox or Gillette,
Yeah.
where the category becomes the name of the brand.
Yeah, it just
because of the power of the brand.
But that just means you've been very successful doing what you've done.
Yes. So Periquita is a blend of three grape varieties. Again, Castelão is the most important one. But then we add two other, which are Trincadeira and Aragonês. Aragonês is the same grape as Tempranillo in Spain.
Okay.
So
yeah, I've noticed there are some grapes that kind of cross over between Portugal and Spain. Albarino being the other big one, which is Alvarinho in
Alvarinho
Portugal.
in Portugal, Albarino in Spain,
Yeah.
yes. There is one other that people think it's the same, but it's actually not, which is Verdelho, which is Verdelho in Portugal and Verdejo in Spain. When we've actually done a DNA analysis of the grape, and we found out that actually it's two different varieties. So that's another one that people might think it's the same grape, but it's actually not. But you're right, there's a few grapes that are similar in Portugal and Spain, even though they have slightly different names or completely different names. In this case, this is called Aragonês in Portugal and Tempranillo in Spain.
Okay.
And in the north of Portugal, it's called Tinta Roriz. So it is a grape with many different names.
I'm learning so much Portuguese today.
So this is a classic blend of Portuguese red wine.
And again, very easy drinking red. Here in the United States, a lot of people tend to lean towards a lot of fruit and a really heavy body.
Yeah.
This is a much lighter style, much less body than the big cabs, but very enjoyable, very easy to drink.
And the other thing is that one of the things Periquita is known for is the very elegant acidity that the wine has, which is something that's very important. First of all, to combine with food, you need some acidity to make the wine interesting with the food. And as well for aging of the wine, it's important to have that acidity. And a few months ago, we were having a vertical tasting of Periquita with many different vintages. And we went from 1990s to 80s, 70s, even 50s, and we had a 1940 and we have a 1938. Oh, wow. And the best wine of the tasting was the Periquita 38, which is a wine with almost 80 years. And that's because of the acidity of Periquita and how well the wine ages. That's one of the key things about this brand.
Well, the acidity just creeps in right at the end to finish here, and it's
makes the wine subtle. Fresh and lively, and which is important for combining it with food.
Now, I could drink this on its own, but what would you pair this with?
I would pair it with a lighter dish of meat, maybe some chicken or some turkey, something that's not too heavy, because the wine is not. I would. If I would need to compare it, I would compare it more with a Pinot Noir instead of a Cabernet Sauvignon. Yes. So I would recommend something on the meat side, but more a lighter type of meat dish.
Yeah, I was trying to contrast it with the Cab.
Yeah.
But yes, it does drink very much like a Pinot Noir. It's a lighter style. It's
even the color is a bit lighter than. Not as light as Pinot Noir, but more on the light side.
But it's more like a red that sort of drinks like a white.
Yeah.
And you've also brought the Reserva.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the difference between the regular and the Reserva?
So, the Reserva in Portugal, it's just a matter of quality. So the wine needs to be of a better quality in order to be called Reserva. In Spain, Reserva just means that the wine spent some time in oak. In Portugal, it has nothing to do with the time the wine spent in oak, just a matter of quality. So the wine needs to be tasted through an independent tasting panel, and they need to approve the wine as Reserva. So in this case, the basic grape is the same, it's called Castelão. But then we add two grapes that are traditional from port wine, from the Douro area, called Touriga Nacional and Touriga Franca. And these two grapes really help uplift the quality of the blend and make it a Reserva style.
Now, when you're harvesting the grapes, are you hand selecting the grapes that go into the Reserva and then leaving the rest for the regular bottle?
We do it with the Castelão. So we select the best Castelão, because Castelão is the only grape that exists in the two wines. So we select the best Castelão for Reserva, and the rest goes into the Periquita original. And then we just add the Touriga Nacional and Touriga Franca to make the Reserva blend.
All right, well, let's give this a try.
Yeah.
So in the retail store, the consumer's going to pay a little more for this bottle.
Yeah, they're going to pay around $16 for the Reserva.
Still a bargain.
Yeah, compared with about $10, $11 for the original.
Well, that's what has blown me away about the Portuguese wines, is they're just such great values. You get so much bang for the buck when you're buying a bottle of Portuguese wine.
Sure. We try to be sensitive with our pricing. We know people are more and more, they're looking for good value, so wines that deliver a lot of quality for the price, and that's what Portuguese wines try to do. That doesn't mean that the wines need to be super, super cheap, but I think they need to be at the correct price for the quality.
And we're all about quality here on the show, but we're even more so about price. And Bob and I like to focus on wines that are under $20. And everything we've had today is priced in that ballpark.
Except this one, everything else is under $20.
This is exactly what we like to recommend.
Yeah. And this is when you look at the business in the US, this is what people are really buying is wines from $10 to $20. That's really the fastest growing category.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot here.
Yeah.
And that's, you read all about the high-end wines that sell for thousands and thousands of dollars, but nobody's ever going to be able to buy those. And they would feel guilty about drinking them if they did. So, when I buy a wine, I want to drink it. So what you've done here is fantastic. This is so complex. I get a lot more fruit than I did with the first Periquita.
Yeah, more depth.
A little more color.
A little bit more color, more body as well. A lot more complex, more layers in the wine. Definitely a higher quality wine than the original. Not saying the original is not.
No, the original is very drinkable.
Yeah. But the reserve is, I would say, it's even though it costs more than the original, for me it's an outstanding value at $16.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a little, just a hint of cedar or some kind of cigar.
Some spiciness
Yes,
as well.
yeah.
Very, very, very good aromatics. Some flowers that's typical of the Touriga Nacional. The aroma of the violets. So that's.
Is there a traditional Portuguese food that you would pair with this?
Portuguese, we eat a lot of codfish, a lot of bacalhau.
Okay.
So maybe, and we have maybe 1,000 different ways of cooking codfish. So I'm sure within those 1,000 different ways, there's. I would cook this with a few of the ways we cook the codfish for sure.
All right, another great pairing. So on to the José de Sousa.
Yeah, so this is these two are Setúbal Peninsula. Now we're going into the Alentejo, which is an area.
Is that the southern part of the country?
Southern part of the country, close to the border with Spain.
Yep.
And that's actually one of the most important regions for producing wine in Portugal. And this is one of the more classical wineries in that area. This winery has a history going back to the 19th century. And it's one of the 2 or 3 oldest wineries in that region. And our company acquired this winery in the 80s, and since from then on we've been managing the winery. And it's a very, very unique winery because in this winery we still have clay pots, and we still
the giant
vinify
clay amphora that
the
the
clay
Romans
amphoras
used to use?
that the Romans used to
Okay.
vinify the wine, and that's a really unique thing about the winery.
And I was going to ask you, what kind of characteristics does that clay impart into the wine?
Well, first of all, you have what we call micro-oxygenation, because the clay allows some contact with oxygen and allows for the wine to be ready at the younger stage. But there's some earthiness to the wine that comes from the clay, a little bit of spiciness as well, and also some leather characteristics, which is very typical of wines from this part of the country. But why don't we taste the wine?
Let's try it. Absolutely. You've piqued my interest.
There is a very important grape in this wine, which is called Grand Noir. Grand Noir is a French name. And even though the grape has a French name, now it only exists in Portugal. It started in France, but it produced wines that were not so good in France. But when the grape came to Portugal, it found its natural habitat there, and it really showed remarkable wines there. And that's one of the most important grapes in this blend. The 2 other grapes, again, are the Aragonês, which is the Tempranillo, and the Trincadeira, which are the 2 grapes typical from the south of Portugal.
I'm always fascinated when I hear about a grape that thrives in one area and just doesn't perform well in another.
Yeah.
And
Same thing with maybe Malbec or Tannat, that they found their natural habitat in different areas.
it just takes patience and on the winemaker's part to find which grapes are going to work
Exactly.
on his land.
This is the type of wine that continuously has been having great scores from all of the important wine publications in the States, which is just talks about the quality of the wine, and vintage after vintage it's getting these great scores.
Oh, you get such a long finish with this too. I'm still tasting this.
Yeah, and the tannins are nice, and you get definitely more grip on this wine compared with some of the others, but it's not excessive.
It's balanced. It's
balanced.
very well balanced. Yeah.
Definitely, I would have this with a heavier type of dish, a heavier meat.
So like a red meat or a game
Red meat, yes.
game meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a lot more body with this. So I was going to ask you, how long do you leave the wine in the clay amphora?
In the clay amphora is just for the vinification, so somewhere from 15 days until about a month, and
Okay.
then we remove the wine after that. It's a very, very artisanal way of producing the wine, And after that, we just put the wine in oak for aging in oak, and then after that we bottle the wine. So it's the amphoras are just for vinification and not for storage.
All right. Well, you've produced another fantastic wine here.
Thank you. So this is Alentejo. Again, it's an area more in the south, a bit warmer. The alcohol here is a little bit higher compared with the others. Here, talking about 14% alcohol.
Yeah.
But definitely a great representative of this area of Portugal.
Well, even though it's got the higher alcohol content, I don't get that burn. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes wines get too hot if the alcohol content's too high. And I just did a tasting last night where that was the case. And everything I tried, it was just too warm in the mouth.
Yeah.
But you've got such a great balance with this.
Absolutely.
You've done a great job.
Thank you.
We've got two more to get through here. This is from Domini, from the Douro region.
From the Douro, yes.
And this wine's unique because you still, you have people crush the grapes with their feet.
On this one.
On the last one.
Yes.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead here. I'm sorry. All right, well, let's go to the Domini then.
Yeah, the Domini, it's a wine coming from the Douro. So for those of you who don't know what Douro is the region where port wine is produced.
And that's in the northern part?
In the northern part, in the
Portugal?
Douro Valley. So this is a river coming from Spain into Portugal. And in Spain you have the Ribeira del Duero wine region. So Duero in Spain is the name of the river. And in Portugal it's called Douro. So Douro is the region where port wine is, or the grapes of port wine are grown. So this is the wine that's being produced in the same region of port wine using the same grapes. But when port wine is a fortified wine and it's a sweet wine, here you have a different style, a light and dry style of wine from this area.
I got some pepper on the nose before
Yes.
it even got into my mouth.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I taste a lot of pepper right now too.
Definitely, you see a different style from the Alentejo.
Yes, very different. Now, what would you drink with this, or eat with this? Excuse me.
Again, I would eat similar type of food versus the José de Sousa. Maybe difference in the type of sauce that you use. Maybe some more berries here, and more fruity style here, and more of a leathery style on the Alentejo. But I would compare these two, and I would have more or less a similar type of dish with these two wines.
Well, this is just big and bold and peppery. And I would
spice.
I would put some red meat with this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the last one is what you were discussing. This is what we consider to be one of our super premium wines. This is a really, really high-end wine. This is the one where we still use people crushing the grapes with their feet in what we call lagares.
So it's just a giant stone trough.
So it's a giant stone, where people go in there and they, for several days, they step on the grapes until the wine is.
Do people volunteer for that, or do you just tell them, hey, you're
they're
stopping
well
grapes
paid.
today?
They're well paid at the same. But it's a fun activity. I've done it myself.
Well, I have friends that I know would pay you to come stomp on the grapes for you.
Well, just give them my contact and we'll.
Okay. Well, let's see what they've created here.
Definitely very deep, intense.
And complex. It's still changing in my mouth.
Yes.
I love this.
You're going to be tasting this for half an hour at least.
I love it. I've fallen in love with everything you've produced here today. You've got some fantastic wines.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you, Antonio, for joining us on Two Guys and a Lot of Wine.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And if you're ever back in the United States, please come visit us again.
Absolutely. Well, if you're ever around Portugal, we're more than happy to welcome all of you guys, and again, also the viewers to visit our cellars.
I'm going to take you up on that. For Two Guys and a Lot of Wine, I'm James Kimbrough, and keep us in your wine cellar.